Distinguished guests, fellow veterans, especially the frontline infantrymen, some of my companions over here. I was an infantry machine gunner, part of General George Patton's famous Third Army in a foxhole just outside of Bastogne, Belgium, in what became known as the Battle of the Bulge. Let me take you back about 79 years. We were just getting ready to jump off in an attack on a strong German position. The temperature's about 10 below zero, a foot or so of snow on the ground. German artillery is blasting our position. The ground is heaving up and down with the violence of the explosions. Trees are splintering and crashing to the ground. The shrapnel is slicing into soldiers' flesh. Rifle and machine gun fire splits the air. The sound is deafening and overwhelming. We are the machine gun section of what is left of an infantry company of the 87th Infantry Division, part of General George Patton's famous Third Army. Hardly more than boys, most of us 18, 19, 20 years old. Within about 10 yards of our position were the bodies of three of my comrades, men that I can never forget, Finn, West, Porzio, half buried in the snow and frozen in the 10 below zero weather, an image that still serves my mind after 79 years. There were to be many more before this war was over. My machine gun squad was now down to 2. For the most part, we were children of the 20s, citizen soldiers, draftees, and volunteers. Young men, raised during the Great Depression, we did not experience the carefree days of childhood. Summoned by the call to arms, especially the sneak attack on Pearl Harbor, we came from across the land, from the farms and the schools and the factories, from the sidewalks of New York to the shores of San Francisco we came. Resourceful, tough, and tempered as hard as steel in the crucible of the Great Depression, these men were as tough as the times in which we were raised. These are the men who made up the fighting strength of the divisions, carried out the orders of the generals, engaged the Germans in mortal combat. These are the men you see here before you. It may be hard to believe, but we were once young and strong. The Battle of the Bulge started in the early morning of December the 16th, 1944, when 3 German armies, about 500,000 men, attacked what was basically 4 American divisions, about 50,000 men, in the Ardennes area of Belgium and Luxembourg. They covered a front of about 75 to 80 miles. These units were outnumbered over 10 to 1 by the massive German assault. The weather was ideal from the German point of view, snow and fog. The American Air Force was almost useless. The early morning stillness of the fog-shrouded forest was suddenly shattered with a thunderclap of a massive artillery barrage landing on the Americans. The onslaught had begun. We were dry-mouthed and our guts churned with fear as masses of German troopers, dressed in greatcoats, emerged through the veil of the early morning fog and mist and charged towards them like men possessed. Low in their foxholes, the GIs prayed to the Lord and opened fire with their rifles and machine guns at the overwhelming Nazi assault. We knew that feeling of utter exhaustion, the inability of our flesh and blood to continue on, yet we must continue or die. We knew firsthand the violent pounding of the heart, the cold sweat, the trembling of the body, and the stark terror that mortal combat brings. It was a hell that had to be endured, and we endured it. There is no way to convey to you the agony, the misery of frontline infantry combat. Even nature was our enemy, with bitterly cold, often below zero weather. The ground was frozen solid, the skies were gray, the days were short with daylight at 8 and darkness by 4. The nights were long and frigid, and snow covered the battlefield. GIs, their bodies numb, were blue-lipped and chilled to the bone. Only a very few of us had proper winter clothing. We very rarely had a chance to be inside a house. We were outside in the zero weather 24 hours a day, day after day, without relief. These are the soldiers who, when their officers and sergeants lay dead, held the enemy at bay in the days when the heavens were falling and the battlefield was inflamed with all the fire and noise humanly possible for over 1 million warriors to create. For a brief moment in history, these men held our nation's destiny in their hands. We did not fail. The assault pushed the defending Americans back, but they made the Germans pay dearly for the ground that they gained. Our army suffered an average of 500 men killed and 1,000 men wounded every day for the over 6 weeks that the Bulge lasted. And that was just in the Bulge area, not the rest of Europe or the Pacific. How I ever survived that slaughter and kept my sanity, I will never know. That I had a strong faith in God and in my Catholic faith certainly helped, although much of what we did was completely alien to those teachings. The killings were the worst. Almost every day, one or more of us would be killed, and every day we would kill Germans. After a while, you became almost numb to it. If you dwelled on it and thought about it, you would probably go crazy. One of the worst things was that even a fairly minor wound could be fatal. The temperature was still down around zero, and if someone was immobilized, they would often freeze to death before help could get to them. The Battle of the Bulge lasted until early February 1945. More than 1 million men participated in this battle. It was to become the greatest and bloodiest battle ever fought by the United States Army. But the cost of victory was high. There in the Ardennes, on that cold, brutal field of battle, 19,000 young Americans answered the angel's trumpet call and had their rendezvous with death. 19,000. Purple Hearts were awarded by the thousands. The Battle of the Bulge cost the American Army about 90,000 casualties, about 19,000 killed in action, 20,000 taken prisoner, and about 50,000 were wounded. When we left the Bulge, I left many friends there. Our machine gun section, which started out with 12 men, was now down to 4. We had 5 killed and 3 badly wounded. Our company was badly decimated, down to about 40 men left from 200. We received replacements and continued our fight through the Siegfried Line, amphibious assaults across the Moselle and then the Rhine rivers under the leadership of General George Patton, all the way across Germany to Czechoslovakia, where we met the Russian army. What we did, what we experienced, represents the love of our country, the love of our religious faith, the love of our fellow citizens, and our love of freedom. We saw what a lack of love and a lack of freedom could do. We saw the concentration camps. We saw the prisoner of war camps. I was involved in the liberation of Buchenwald concentration camp, one of the largest in order of concentration camp. We saw the bodies stacked like cordwood. Bodies were still being burned in the ovens. We saw the inmates like starved skeletons, too weak to move. We saw the vile inhumanity of man against man. Tears still well in my eyes. I remember all the friends that I lost in the fields, towns, and cities of Europe. Not only on Memorial Day or Veterans Day, but many times every day. Why them and not me? Did someone else take the bullet intended for me? I got hit 3 times, but only very minor flesh wounds. I only know that God took them at 18, 19, 20 years of age and has allowed me to reach my 98th year. And I thank him for it every day. My grandchildren sometimes ask, were you a hero in the war, Poppy? My answer is no, but I was in a company of heroes. Ask yourselves now, with heads bowed, from where, O God, came such men as these, the warriors of the greatest generation, a generation that is taking their final curtain calls of over 1,000 men a day, and soon we all will have left. This country was truly blessed. The Ardennes woods are silent now. The battle smoke has fled. 70 years and 9 have passed. Now only memories and the dead. May God bless you. May God bless America and our troops serving around the world. Thank you.